Hello, everybody, and welcome back to TARTLEcast. You are here for a specific episode around TARTLE University and dialogue. And joining us today is a world-class expert and futurist in the matter, also advisor here to TARTLE itself and the growing global business that we have. Travis Kellerman, thank you for joining us today to talk about it.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Ready to get in.
That's what we're doing right now. We're having a dialogue, right?
We just started.
Yeah, so we got to kick this off. Let's go with the educational piece. You and I fundamentally think that dialogue is so incredibly important for the evolution of human beings, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think the key thing for us to do here is to define it. So let's start with this, Travis. What is dialogue in and of itself?
Dialogue is a discovery. It's a free exchange of ideas, and it's done with a very clear intention.
Okay,
to solve a problem.
All right, so you and I have come here to speak to one another. It's not going to behoove us or do any good if you and I are talking over one another. We're not trying to actually discover something which would be the educational approach for what is dialogue itself, correct?
That's right. We're not having an argument. That's not the intention. We're not even having a debate. This is a dialogue, a distinctly different thing.
And you said within that free exchange, how do you define what the free exchange is, right? I can sit here and just spew things all day long. I could talk about the functions of dialogue. I could specify it, but what makes it so free in the exchange of what I'm saying and you being able to receive it?
When you get to a state of trust with someone, when you know you're not going to be criticized, when your brain recognizes the other person is not a threat, when you're thinking creatively about how to solve a problem, again, this is an intention to solve a problem. There's a goal or an intention to dialogue. It's a free flow, but you're also intending to arrive somewhere. Now, how you get there is open. That's the discovery. But what makes dialogue a true dialogue is that freedom and the safety, the psychological security to discover something. So the other person needs to uphold that. They need to support and help create that. And that's what we're doing. We know each other. But if we didn't, I would want to know something about you. Mm-hmm. And the matter at hand, I'd want to know your connection to it. So if we were talking about something in politics, I might want to know how you grew up. And if you had a set of beliefs around that topic, why you carried that set of beliefs. So establishing that, it's not just rapport, it's an understanding and a respect for another person. And there's many religions, there's many cultures that have different names for that. When I was in Thailand, and I'm going to butcher this Thai phrase, but something along the lines of Jeng Chai, which means, and it's hard to translate into English, but they referred to the principle of seeing everyone as a person first. So it didn't matter their class, their race, their standing in the other hierarchies that we use to divide people. You first see them as a person. So grounding in that this is a person with a set of lived experiences, with a context that you have to understand to appreciate their views, to appreciate how they're entering this dialogue. You have to meet them where they're at. So freedom means respect and understanding.
So if I'm going to meet someone where they're at, before I even go through the process of listening, I need to remove any of the biases that I have coming into that process when I'm going to make an observation, right? So if I'm looking at you, I'm going to absorb everything visually first, And then beyond that, after I've done that, and now I understand this is a human being I'm paired with. They're not a threat. I'm going to let that piece of the guard down. And then I'm going to open up with a question, whether it be some function of just getting to know who you are, whether it's your name, right? Understanding a small function of your background, and then start to dive into it. But I can't carry a bias with that because that's going to be essentially like my first roadblock. That's going to stop the freedom because what I'm doing is I'm chaining down an idea in my mind saying that I know this person better than they know themselves. So I'm going to come into this dialogue or supposed dialogue for what I'm calling it and say, I'm going to tell you something, but I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. And then I'm going to sum up everything that's coming back to me out of your mouth strictly through my lens. Mm-hmm. So the discovery in dialogue, it's not going to be there because you're the one actually going out, sending a signal out, but there's nothing for you to receive back in return because all you're doing the whole time is trying to overpower this idea, this aspect, this personality that is sitting on the other side of you, trying to actually share ideas with you. And that's inhibiting to the dialogue itself. So the free exchange gets cut off. Discovery gets cut off. So if I understand this correctly, I would come to you, Travis. I would say, okay, I'm coming to you as a human being. Let's have a dialogue. I would like to know something, whether it's something about you or something about a topic which you might be an expert in. I'm here to open up my ears and my mind. So stage one is drop all of those things, all of those protective barriers, all those attachments, all those ideas I have about how people act, operate, and think, and how it could possibly hurt me or my mind in some sort of fashion. I have to let that stuff go. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to fully embrace the dialogue, the quality, right? And really the gauge of who you are as a human being in this conversation if those things are in place. Is that right?
And what you just described is not easy. That's approaching some state of complete objectivity or Zen, really, to pull yourself out of all your biases and also subconscious things that you're not aware of. So how can you pull yourself out of those, if you will? I think it's important to recognize dialogue is a process. It's an ongoing process. And sometimes getting to a stage of trust and openness, that may be the first few conversations, if you will, or that may be its own goal. So before you reach some other higher outcome from dialogue, just establishing that's the long-term investment. And that takes a lot of humility, because I think something else to recognize is not just the removal of threat and feeling like this other person may be attacking you, or you need to defend your beliefs, going in with this defensive position, but also that I think it's a very human trait in empathy and in other states of compassion to want to support someone in their beliefs, to have a natural inclination to try to affirm what they believe, because it's giving in a way. In that moment, in the short term, it's validating to that person. So not challenging too harshly too soon, because meeting someone where they're at is also an important principle. You have to see them as a person on a continuum of understanding, someone who's experienced things that may take them out of a state of objectivity and openness. And they've had experiences that you can't understand fully that affirm those beliefs and affirm that defensiveness, if you will.
Sure.
So feeling that, acknowledging that, not feeling attacked, and also not blindly supporting everything someone else says, not creating an echo chamber, but actually advancing to a state of new understanding. That's a kind of third path that you both have to reach. It's a state outside of both of yourselves.
So then let me ask something, and this is how we can sum this up here for really defining the dialogue itself. Can the dialogue happen with yourself only? Before you even take the steps to have a dialogue with another human being, does it need to occur with you first to remove a lot of these barriers, to build that self-awareness? You have to have that internal dialogue, internal trust that everything's going to be okay. Do you think that's a required mechanism, really understanding dialogue first internally and then externally really experiencing what that is between another?
Yes. And people suspend themselves for rites of passage and convention and tradition quite often. We see this in many religions and in many cultural traditions. That same acceptance, the sinking in, if you will, the acknowledgement that this is a space that should be sacred. That's where it starts. So internal reflection and preparing yourself to enter that. Honestly assessing, am I, first of all, capable of that right now? Mm-hmm. Do I have the time, the space? Am I healthy enough to engage in this way? So that preparation before you step in, that's really the first step. And that's where it starts, is acknowledging that dialogue takes a concerted effort to prepare yourself before you enter it. And you can see it's night and day between what happens when someone is carrying the momentum of stress and other effects, other things that pull them out of that state when they try to enter a problem-solving space, a place where there's open, free discussion, as opposed to someone who has prepared for it, not just had the time to, but mentally has accepted that everything else needs to be set aside, that I can't let those things carry into this sacred space. And that alone is a restriction on many people, because day to day, many folks don't ever find that time and space. They don't ever find the quiet needed, I think, to embrace that humility. So creating that first, and then also acknowledging that this is a process. Incomplete dialogue is still positive. It's still something to look for, because any glimpse of it is powerful. It's very nascent. It's hard to see, and getting to a pure state is nearly impossible with everything we have going on.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Travis, thank you for helping us define what dialogue is, and for everyone else that is here in this certain section of TARTLE University. We encourage you to move through to the other data packets that we have and learn a little bit more about dialogue and these subsets and structures of what creates this thing as we get down to the nitty-gritty here in the conversation. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Core skills coming up.